All right, let's get started. I am Mandeep Singh, CEO and founder of Mandeeps.com. And in this particular webinar, we're talking about real-time intrusion detection and prevention, or in other words, how to stop your site from getting hacked. So let's get started. At any time during this webinar, if you have any questions, please use chat to ask those questions. I will be looking at them throughout, and I will be answering them as we go along. So feel free to ask any questions at any time. So without further ado, let's get started. We have a short group with us today. I think there's about 6 or 8 of us here. So as we get towards the end, I will open it up. So if anybody wants to ask questions through voice, we'll be happy to do that as well. Without further ado, let's get into Live Shield. So Live Shield is a new product we just released last week. And the goal of Live Shield is to do real-time detection and prevention of any intrusion or anybody hacking into your DN site. This is by far one of my most exciting products, at least that's keeping me excited. We built this for about a year and a half now, so it's been used with our own internal sites and some of our clients, and we thought it's time for it to kind of move it out and give it access to public and community in general, especially if you're running an older version of DNS. So let's preface this webinar by saying by no means am I suggesting that you run an older version of DNS. And this product, Live Shield, is not a replacement for best practices to secure a website. So that is a given. Make sure you're on the latest DNS version. Make sure you do everything you have to in terms of best practices to secure your DNS site. Where Live Shield comes in is not preventing somebody to get into your site. It's more as your last resort shield, that if someone were to get into your site, well, let's make sure they don't do any damage. And let's notify an admin, hey, we had a hacker who was able to get access to our site. All right, let's get started. Like I said, at any time, if you have any questions, please put them in chat and I'll go through them. So let's look at what Live Shield is. So Live Shield adds a layer of protection around your site, basically to identify, quarantine, and neutralize a hack in real time, keeping your site safe from a malicious attacker. And how does it do that? Basically, it does that through continuously monitoring. It monitors the file system. So one obvious is it's make sure there's intrusion. Nobody's coming in and adding new files to your site or modifying the existing ones. So that's super important. And then the other way we do it is through a part of it could be SQL injection, but I'll talk about it. It's more about super user privileges. So there's basically 2 modes in Live Shield. You can run it into a detection mode, which means it will monitor and log all the identified threats, and it will email you immediately if it finds anything, but it will not block any of those threats. So detection mode is great when you're first starting with Live Shield. As an admin, you want to run in detection mode for several days to understand what is it picking, what is it logging, so you don't go ahead and quarantine legitimate stuff. You know, there might be your modules that are creating a bunch of CSV files, and that's okay, right? You don't want those blocked. So take a couple days to have the detection mode give you a bunch of logs, look through them, figure out what is normal, and then add them to exclusion. And then what is not normal is what we want to work on. So detection mode allows an admin to basically observe the logs for any false positive and tweak any necessary settings. If you're familiar with Azure Web Application Firewall, they do the kind of similar thing, detection and prevention mode. So we kind of follow that model. Prevention mode, on the other hand, if you have it set to prevention mode, not only will it monitor, identify, it will actually block any threats. So this is super important. Let's say a hacker is able to exploit a vulnerability in third-party module or DNS platform core and is able to upload a rootkit to your site. Well, Live Shield will identify that and will actually make sure that rootkit is inaccessible so the hacker cannot use it, and it will notify you. Now, this is great because it means every time it detects a dangerous files, it basically quarantines it, and we'll talk about what that means. But it brings an interesting thing that if you as an admin is now installing a new extension or module, well, it's going to detect that too as potentially dangerous. So it is super important that when you're running in prevention mode, that you disable Live Shield before you install any new extensions. Again, we'll talk about all this in a few minutes here. So I guess Let's go ahead and get into it. And the other thing LiveShield does is super user privileges. So a lot of the times, and we've covered the two most important exploits, that is ability to upload a file or modify a file on your site, and or use SQL injection or something else to grant yourself super user privileges, because then you have access to the entire database and you know, all kind of admin privileges. You can look at the web config, you can do anything you want. So super user privileges are super critical. You want to make sure nobody else has them. LiveShield puts a layer around that too. It makes sure nobody can grant themselves super user privileges, either through directly SQL injection or anything else. So let's go ahead and jump right into it. I have a installation of DNN 9.10.1 here, just default installation. And I just created a page and I added a LiveShield module on. Now, ideally, you'd want to create this page that is not visible in the menu. It's only to admins and so forth. I believe out of the box, the module is only visible to super users. So very simple UI, there's activity and administration. I'm just going to jump to administration really quick. And I see right now we have it's set to disabled. We have a question from Henry. Is it compatible with live signature as the customers upload files regularly? Yeah, we're going to look at that, Henry. It's not just live signature. You could have any kind of third-party module, right, where users are uploading files and so forth. And we want to make sure that we, as an admin, can identify what is allowed and what is not allowed. And we're going to go ahead and kind of take a look at that here in a demo. So that's precisely why we have detection mode. We don't want to start this module in prevention mode and kind of, you know, basically create a havoc with all the different things that are going on behind the scenes. As an admin, you're probably not even aware how many things are changing on your site continuously. So you want to have this detection mode to be able to first figure that out. And once you have a good grasp on it, that, you know, okay, this is okay, this is allowed, and we're going to exclude that. That means I don't need to see it in logs over and over. Then you can go ahead and turn on the prevention mode. All right, so let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to go ahead and set up detection mode. And as I say right here, all activities logged, but threats are not neutralized and not quarantined. Use this mode to review activity log and adjust settings prior to enabling prevention mode. All right, great. So that's great. And then we'll jump through these really quick. And this right here saying which file types are never allowed. So out of the box, LiveShield will not allow ASCX, ASHX, ASP, or any kind of server-side or code executable. Because if somebody can put one of these files on your site, they pretty much have access to the entire site. They can write and execute code, whether it's a HTML file or an ASCX or ASHX or ASPX or classic ASP or PHP, and they can go ahead and, you know, expose your site and basically take over. So by default, LiveShield will block all these. You don't have to worry about it. But if there is another file that comes out that is specific to you, your business, or, you know, a new server site that comes out, then you can manually add your own list that these extensions are never allowed, period. So very easy here. Exclusions is where this gets interesting, and the question that Henry just asked. So if you have a module that is creating a bunch of CSV files or a bunch of PDF files, well, you don't necessarily, well, they're okay. PDF is not going to harm anything, right? But you still probably don't even want that in your log because you don't need to see it on over and over again. So you can add what we call exclusions, and you can exclude an entire folder if you have a folder that is dedicated for your purpose. Not really recommended, because then if a hacker knows you have a folder that's excluded, they can exploit that too. But again, it adds another layer of complexity. Or you can add certain files, or you can exclude certain kind of extensions. So for example, if CSVs are okay, you can exclude those, or PDFs are okay, you can exclude those, and so forth. Now you could use an asterisk in any of these. So if you have a module that's dynamically creating files, then you can do that as well. You know, just use an asterisk as a wildcard corrector. And lastly, we have notifications. I'm going to enable these, and you can have notifications go out to your site admin, and you can do whatever you want as a from name, as you could say LiveShield, site threat detected, whatever. So you can set up your Outlook rule to prioritize them and whatnot. So let's go ahead and set this hit update. The only thing I've done is move LiveShield into detection mode, and I'm back here at activity. So far, there's no activity logged. What I'm going to do is bring in my file structure. So this is what my files look like. Let's see if we can get rid of this navigation pin. All right. So this is what my file structure looks like. Now, this is the interesting thing about LiveShield. It doesn't matter how your site is exposed, whether it is through a DNN platform vulnerability or a third-party module vulnerability, or somebody just got access to your FTP credentials and just logged into your FTP. LiveShield doesn't care how the intrusion came in. It just makes sure that there is no intrusion. So let's kind of take a look at this. I'm at the root right now of my website, and I'm going to go ahead and create a new file, just a text file, and call it test. So if I were to just come here and refresh, I see that that was logged, that somebody created a text file called new text document, and then it was renamed to test.txt, and the original name was new text document.txt. I'm going to go a little bit slower now because there's a lot happening behind the scenes, and we want to make sure we all understand. And again, any questions, please bring them out through chat. So it's logging any file changes it detects. Now, if you have a pretty busy site, you can imagine there'll be thousands and thousands and thousands of things being logged. That's okay, but the point is, the log should really be for an admin to look for unusual or suspicious things. So if I have a module that's creating a bunch of text files, I don't need that to be logged. I then would go into the exclusions, either exclude that folder ending with .txt or exclude the txt in general, or some kind of pattern to make sure it's not logged over and over again unnecessarily. So when I come and review this activity log, the burden for me to manage this module and review, it's very little if I set my exclusions up correctly. All right. That's simple, test.txt. Well, what if somebody were to upload or rename this txt file to ASCX or ASPX? So I just went ahead and renamed it to test.ascx. And this is one of the files that are not allowed. It's not allowed to be uploaded at all. Because we're running in a detection-only mode, no action was taken, but this was flagged as a threat, that there's a serious issue going on, and a threat was identified. Now, we have our notifications enabled. So at this point, an email would have gone out to the admin saying a threat has detected with this exact information that an ASCX at that particular root was found, which it shouldn't be there. All right, I'm going to go ahead and just delete that test.ascx. And same goes, I mean, if I were to upload something else, ASPX, ASHX, it will do the same thing. Now let's go ahead and look at something different. This is robots.txt, right? I'm just going to add a new line here and save this. And let's refresh back up here. And it detected that too, that robots.txt got changed. So right out the bat, it's an extremely useful, right out the gate, it's an extremely useful tool for administrators to know what's going on. As long as you've set up your exclusions correctly, you're going to only be looking at data that is important and it's suspicious and unusual. Well, once you've looked at this data and once you've set up exclusions, then that's, I'm going to clear this log just so it's easier to look at. That's when you want to go in prevention mode. And you hit update. So now let's talk about how does it actually do quarantine and so forth. So I'm going to bring this back up and I'm going to again do the same thing. I'm going to create a text file and call it test.txt. If you go to our log, you will see logged that and everything is still logged there. Now, if I were to change this to test.ascx, notice, as soon as it changed to test.ascx, my Windows reported the file doesn't exist. And what happened is LiveShield kicked in. We can look at that right here too. LiveShield kicked in and quarantines that file. So if the goal here is if a hacker gets access to your site, is able to upload a file to your site, that file disappears. What we do is we simply rename the file. The file is still there. We don't want to delete it because you want it for your audit trail. You want to know what's happened, what's going on. We just renamed it with .resources. Now, .resources is a explicitly disallowed extension in IIS. So you cannot serve a file through IIS that ends with .resources. This is the out-of-the-box configuration. Of course, if you've modified your IIS configuration, that may not be the case, but that is a very standard practice. And out-of-the-box IIS will not allow .resources file to be served. So if you were to hit this file on your site, you're going to get a 404. So very easy way for us to quarantine. The file is still there, but it's now rendered useless. There's nothing you can do. Again, at this point, an email notification is sent out to the admin that a threat was detected and quarantined. So that is great. Now, it's not just, as I said, it's not just about uploading a new file. If I were to go rename existing other files, it will do the same exact thing. It won't let you rename an existing ASPX to ASCX and so forth while LiveShield is running. So this basically takes care of 90% of the attacks within the DNN ecosystem, which is somebody's uploading a rootkit to your site and getting access to your site. The other special use case of this is, what if someone were to default change the default.aspx? This is extremely common. And we've seen that through the history of DNN, that people go and edit default.aspx and add some code in default.aspx, which then starts showing up on every page on your site, whether defacing your site or adding a little JavaScript or cross-site scripting and whatnot. So let's see what happens if I were to somehow get access to your default.aspx, again, either through a third-party vulnerability, by a network admin going rogue, by somebody giving FTP credentials to unauthorized users, whatever the case may be. If I were able to get access to default.aspx, and let's just say I'm going to add a blank line. I'm not even doing major changes. I'm just adding a blank line and hit save. I'm going to go ahead and refresh this page here. And what happened is, if you notice, the site kind of crashed, restarted, and now shows this site is down for maintenance. Well, we detected that default.aspx got tampered with, and the entire DNN site runs off default.aspx. So at this point, the site is no longer eligible to be shown because it could be defaced, or it's basically affecting every single page of your site. So what we do here, what LiveShield does, is LiveShield has this app offline.html.shield. The .shield tells you this is a file placed by LiveShield. So it's a simple HTML file that says site is down and has some messaging in it. And all it does is, when it detects a tampering with default.aspx in prevention mode, it creates a copy of that as app offline.html, which brings your site down gracefully and shows this message to your users. An admin will be able to very quickly identify this, and then you can obviously go ahead and customize this and put your own messaging in it. And we'll know somebody tampered with default.aspx. The site was hacked. And they can go ahead to bring the site back at any time, simply just delete this app offline.html, and the site will come right back on. And at this point, the logs will indicate that default.aspx was changed. You can see right here, the default.aspx was changed and it was quarantined. So that is great because, you want to make sure that if somebody's defacing your site, you bring it down gracefully rather than the site being defaced and being visible by everybody else. Any questions at this time in terms of file monitoring? So LiveShield will do file monitoring on your site to make sure there's no intrusion, no new files coming out, nobody's changing files when they're not allowed to. That means unless you have them in exclusion, it will be logged. And if it's a disallowed file type, then it's considered an attack. So nobody can upload a PHP, JSP, Java, or rename an existing file to those extensions and so forth. So that's part one of LiveShield. Any questions on this, I'll be happy to address. Otherwise, we'll move on to part two of LiveShield, which is securing super user privileges. And just to example, I have an email box set up right here. Every time a quarantine was detected, or an email went out to the admin saying that your default.aspx was quarantined on a particular day. Here's the log ID message was sent from LiveShield and so forth. We have a couple of questions. So can a hacker deactivate LiveShield and then do Mischief? So great question, William. Yeah, well, deactivating LiveShield is as easy as hitting disabled and hitting update, but only a super user can do that. Now, to replicate that, let's say at a lower level, well, these settings are saved in database. So if somebody has access to your database or your database is exposed, then they can do that. And how would your database get exposed? So a couple of ways. One way is if you have your SQL server open to the public, which we should never have. Like I said, that's why LiveShield does not replace your best practices. That always needs to be in place. Other ways, somebody knows your system admin password to your database. Well, remember, there's a bunch of layers now. They also now have to know that you are running LiveShield and so forth. But for a moment, let's assume somebody does have access through SQL injection to your site. And can they go ahead and do that? Well, to be able to execute SQL queries through like let's say SQL console or something, you need to have super user privileges. So if somebody is has super user privileges, they can go rogue and they can do a lot of different things. So that's the next part we're going to look at, where we block somebody from getting super user privileges. So question from Elliot, is the site offline feature engaged if any file is edited or just the default.aspx? No, absolutely, just the default.aspx. If any file is edited, we don't want to take our site down for that. We only take the site down if the default.aspx is compromised, because default.aspx is essentially every page, every functionality on your site. If that is compromised, then the entire site, every aspect of it is compromised. So yeah, the only time the site will go offline is default.aspx is compromised. When some other file gets compromised, we quarantine that file. We take that out of the picture, but your rest of your site runs perfectly fine. So if someone, like we demonstrated, if I were to upload, let's say, a new file here called, and let's do it in a different fashion. Hold on a sec. I'm going to create a new folder to kind of just emulate what a user would do. So I have this now file called rootkit.aspx, and I could go ahead and upload that through a vulnerability in third-party module or in DNN platform or through FTP, and I'm just going to drag it and drop it here. And if you notice, as soon as I dragged it and dropped it, it changed right here into rootkit.aspx.resources. So we quarantined that file, even though somebody was able to get access to our site and they could have uploaded something, but the file is rendered useless. They can't do anything with it. It does not affect default.aspx. Your site doesn't go down. We just quarantined that one hack right there. And as you can see right here, it detected that and it quarantined. So let's address next question. I had a hacker come in once and added code to a footer control. Yeah, that's again very common. They would add HTML markup to your module footers. But now think about it. How can they do that? The only way they can do that if they have SQL access, which means either your SQL server is exposed or the hacker had super user access to your site, which means they can go ahead and execute their own SQL queries. So this is the second part where we're going, where it's super important to block anybody getting super user access. All right, if there's no other questions here, we can go ahead and move to that part. What I'm going to do is bring the SQL Server in, and if you can notice, there's really two users. There's a super user account, which is super user, and just one other user. What I'm going to do is create a new user. Again, this is a normal part. Anybody on your DNN site is able to create a user if you have your registration open to public. So now that I've created a user, and I'm able to log in with that user and so forth, just a normal user, I don't have access to anything else. If somebody has an account on your site and if they are able to find a vulnerability in one of the modules and able to do SQL injection, one of the things, the most common things they do is elevate their privilege to a super user. So if they can go ahead and do that, they have access to your entire site. Now they can log into your site as super user and read all the web.config files and pretty much everything exposed. Your database passwords get exposed, everything gets exposed. So remember, we have Live Shield running in prevention mode right now. So it is actually blocking all the threats. If I were to go ahead and create a SQL statement here called update users set is super user equals 1. So I'm elevating privileges for user ID 3. And I hit that. Where user ID equals 3. Let me execute that. So that did get executed. Now, let's go back and take a look at the users. Notice it did not get changed. Even though the SQL query was executed, the super user permission did not get updated because Live Shield intervened. And if we were to come back here, and again, at this time, an email would go out to notification. Email notification would go out to an admin, letting them know that somebody tried granting super user privileges to user ID 3, and it was quarantined, meaning the privileges were not granted. This also means a regular admin, if a regular admin decides to then go to users and then grant privileges to one of the users here, even that would not work. Because again, Live Shield doesn't care how you get access to it, it's just monitoring the data. It will not let you do that. So the second part that comes up, if as an admin, you really want to go ahead and do some of these things or install a new extension, you would have to first make sure you go ahead and put it in detection mode or disable mode before you go ahead and do that. But now, as you can see, what I was just doing, that got blocked as well. But now, nobody can go ahead and grant themselves privileges. And it's not just a specific user. If somebody were to just do a blanket statement, update all users and set everybody is super user. And if I were to execute that, notice still nothing changed. The original super user is still original super users. The others two did not get their changes. So this is super cool. Again, like I said, one of the modules that I'm excited about because it just really adds that layer and another sense of protection to your site. This time you can see somebody tried to grant super user privileges to both ID 3s and 2 because ID 1 already had privilege, so that didn't get changed and it was quarantined. Now again, because we're running in prevention mode, it is going and actually stopping from the database to get updated. But if we were to just be in detection mode, and if I were to execute this here, you will now see the change did go through, but it will be still flagged and logged for an admin to know and review. So super important. Like I said, before you do any grants of super user privileges yourself as a super user, make sure you come back to Live Shield, put into detection mode or disabled mode. And again, very important, if you're installing a new extension, A new extension has a lot of ASCX. It could have ASHX. It could have ASPX. A lot of the files which have the potential if a malicious user were uploading them. So you want to make sure before you install any new extensions that you put Live Shield into detection or disable mode before you actually go ahead and install. Otherwise, it's going to literally take all your new extension files and quarantine them, and your module will be basically, or extension will be useless. All right, we have more questions coming in, and I believe that's the end of the presentation for me. So if there are any questions, now is a great time to bring them. I think I've covered everything, the exclusions, how quarantine works, how does it take the site offline if somebody tampers with default.aspx and so forth. And then we looked at the super user privileges as well. So let's address some of the questions. I have a question. How does it monitor the direct to database change? That's a great question, Eric. Part of me says don't disclose that because the hackers would know. But it takes literally a few minutes for anybody to find out. We're using triggers behind the scenes in database. So there's triggers that are set up on database that are monitoring if that particular table, user's table, and that particular column ever gets changed. And we're only monitoring if it gets changed from 0 to 1, which means somebody's elevating them to a SQL privilege. If somebody were to take 1 and take it to 0, that's not a concern. So if you were to log in as an admin and take away somebody's super user privilege, that should work. But if you're granting one, Live Shield is going to kick in saying, look, that is a potentially very dangerous thing, and we want to make sure this is legitimate and not a malicious user doing it. So yeah, that's how database changes are being tracked. Another question we have, so would you switch to detection mode from protection mode when installing any of your live modules? Yeah, absolutely. So not just any of our modules, anytime you're installing a new extension on DNN, and of course, make sure you source your extensions from credible sources. They're coming from a vendor or open source project that is established. So anytime you upload an extension, you would probably want to put it in detection mode, and not. Another question I have, is there a way to clear logs? Yes, so you could just hit clear log right here on the top, and that takes care of it. The other question is there a schedule for this? There is no scheduler in Live Shield yet, so logs do not clear automatically unless you clear them. They will continue to get accumulated. And again, it's all great feedback. Maybe in future we want to put in administrator a maintenance task to automatically clear the log, maybe every 2 weeks, every month. I'm not sure, but we'll be happy to take your feedback and incorporate that in. Any other questions? Have another question from Eric. If user registration is disabled, does Live Shield monitor user creation? Not at this time, but that seems like a great addition. I mean, if user registration disabled, there's absolutely no reason for new users to be created. So that is something that could be added on. Eric, if you could please post that on our site as a suggestion, can go under community ideas, and we'll definitely like to incorporate that into Live Shield next update. Right, last chance for any questions. Otherwise, it's a wrap from me. That's it for this one. So thanks everyone for joining me, and you guys have a wonderful day today. Take care. Bye-bye.